Okay? All right, so this is now again RP3. And as I said I would in RP1, we're going to go back. We're going to go to the orally transmitted teachings. I'm going to go back to the foreword by Daisaku Ikeda on page 9, IX, Roman numeral 9. I don't know if here, is that comfy? Okay, that's comfy for me. Okay, President Ikeda says on the orally transmitted teachings, which by the way, he's the one that made sure Mr. Watson got the coin to decide to do this. He says, I view with the greatest pleasure the publication of this English translation of the Ongikuden, or Record of the Orally Transmitted Teachings by Dr. Burton Watson, a translator of world renown. For it will introduce to the world at large the essence of East Asian Buddhism, the essence which is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Dr. Watson is widely known for his deep understanding of Chinese literature and his translations of Sima Qian's records of the historian and of Chinese poetry. We first met in 1973. I had for some time thought of him as the most suitable person to undertake a translation of the Lotus Sutra, and I expressed the hope that he would one day gratify us with a translation done from Kumarajiva's Chinese version of the text, which is everything Tentai did. And everything Nichiren is talking about is based on Kumarajiva's translation, Chinese translation of the Lotus Sutra. I was, of course, aware that there were already a number of English translations of the sutra. My hope, however, was that he would produce a translation marked by stylistic beauty, one that would do justice to the literary qualities of the text, and at the same time be easily understood by readers not already familiar with Buddhism. Dr. Watson, having agreed to my proposal, fulfilled his promise 20 years later with the publication of this translation of the Lotus Sutra. It has proved a major event. It has proved a major event in the history of the world of Buddhism, a powerful beacon to light the future of humankind. In 1992, the year before Dr. Watson's translation of the Lotus Sutra appeared, I met with him again. We talked about the Ongikuden, which embodies Nichiren's comments on the Lotus Sutra. Dr. Watson, who by this time had completed his translation of the sutra itself, expressed a deep interest in the manner in which Nichiren interpreted it. Aware of the many problems involved, he agreed, nevertheless, to undertake an English translation of the Ongikuden as well. Now a fitting adornment to his long career as a translator, his translation of that text is being published. I am confident that it will open up the world of the profound philosophical teachings of Buddhism and act as a joyous revelation to all humankind. Numerous persons throughout the world who seek a deeper understanding of Buddhism have heard of the Ongikuden, but only a few have had a glimpse of its contents. Many have expressed a strong desire to learn more about the text and have long wished for an English translation. On the occasion of the publication of this translation, I would like to say here a brief word about my own understanding of the Ongikuden. So even President Ikeda is saying this, what I'm saying is my Buddhahood talking, how I received and perceived what Nichiren left in this work, and how it relates to the actual text of Kumarajiva's translation of the Chinese Lotus Sutra. He says, as I recall, this is the middle of page Roman numeral 10. As I recall, it was August of 1962 when I began a series of lectures on the Ongikuden designed for college-level students who were members of the Soka Gakkai. I wanted to train future leaders of the movement and to make the profound philosophy of Nichiren accessible in contemporary terms. It was a time of nuclear armament, an age engulfed in hatred and mistrust, and I felt there was a deep need to replace these with a humanism based on mutual trust and harmony. Generally speaking, Buddhism is viewed as an exploration of the inner world of the individual, focusing mainly upon meditation and observance of religious precepts or rules, And in fact, it has largely ignored the question of how these inner concerns of the individual can be applied to the outer world of society as a whole. Therefore, few people perceive Buddhism as a philosophy for the attainment of world peace. Nichiren, however, as he demonstrated in his famous On Establishing the Correct Teaching for the Peace of the Land, postulated a fundamental truth or principle that a revolution beginning within the inner being of the individual can then bring about a similar revolution in the world at large. Basing himself upon the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren did not look to some external being, such as a Buddha or the gods, as the source of his revelation in the individual and in society. Instead, he perceived a law or truth that permeates both the inner being of the individual and the life force of the universe as a whole, and sought to open up and disseminate an understanding of that truth, the truth of the original state, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. But this concept, the original state, far transcended the ordinary thinking of the age in which he lived, and as a result, the Lotus Sutra had predicted, as the Lotus Sutra itself had predicted, he could not fail but encounter numerous grave difficulties. And indeed, the very fact that he endured such difficulties in the course of propagating the sutra was proof of the correctness of its teachings, and at the same time evidence that he was, as it were, reading the Lotus Sutra with his whole life, with his whole being, that he was a true votary of the Lotus Sutra, just as we strive to be. In later years, the Bodhisattva of the earth, in later years when Nichiren retired to Mount Minobu, he delivered a series of lectures on the Lotus Sutra for the instruction of his disciples. He revealed the hidden meaning of the sutra passages that were so familiar to him, the meanings that earlier authorities on the sutra, such as the great teacher Tentai and the great teacher Myolo, had not fully brought to light. Nichiren, utilizing the work of these earlier commentators, Nichiren, utilizing the work of these earlier commentators in his own lectures on the sutra, proceeded to make clear these hidden meanings. His lectures were recorded and compiled by Nikko, one of his closest disciples. Nichiren gave his approval to the work, whose completion is recorded as the first day of the first month of the first year of the Koan era, which corresponds to the year 1278. It later came to be known as the Ongikuden, or the record of the orally transmitted teachings. The charge is often made, I guess by critics, the charge is often made that the Lotus Sutra, although abounding in highly vivid similes and parables, lacks philosophical content. I'll say that again, because that is really what it gets down to here. How can you use the Lotus Sutra in daily life? Give me a break. It's completely different than chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. The charge is often made that the Lotus Sutra, though abounding in highly vivid similes and parables, which we'll touch on, lacks philosophical content. It doesn't tell you how to get there. If we look only at its surface meaning, which is the translation we will be seeing, we may perhaps agree with such an opinion. But Buddhism customarily applies three approaches to interpreting its writings, examining them first from the standpoint of the words of the text, then from that of the ideas or meaning implied by the words, and finally from that of the underlying purport or purpose of the work. Continuing on page Roman numeral 12. Chinese authorities of the Lotus Sutra, such as Tentai and Myolo, by pondering the words of the sutra, had derived from them certain subtle ideas or doctrines, which they described in terms such as the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, the attainment of Buddhahood in the remote past, opening the near and revealing the distant, or the replacement of the 3 vehicles with the 1 vehicle. All of that comes from Tentai and Myolo. It doesn't come from it comes from the Lotus Sutra, but it comes from their commentaries of interpretation. And of course, those are cornerstone understandings that Nichiren utilizes in the teaching of the Buddhism of sowing. Now that Nam-myoho Renge-kyo can make itself known because it's the right time. It's the 500-year period where the original teacher is supposed to appear to leave the original teaching, which is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So again, Chinese authorities on the Lotus Sutra, such as Tentai and Yolo, by pondering the words of the sutra, had derived from them certain subtle ideas or doctrines, which that I've shown and will qualify in the Ongikuden, which they described in terms such as the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, which is discussed in the Ongikuden, the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, which is discussed in the Ongikuden, the attainment of Buddhahood in the remote past. All of this, the opening of the near and revealing the distant, or the replacement of 3 vehicles with one vehicle. But their commentaries had not yet brought to light the underlying purpose or import of the Lotus Sutra as it relates to Kosen Rufu. They were not talking about it from that perspective of widespread propagation. It was something that you had to get to the point of Makashikan capacity of meditation before you could begin to get where these guys were coming from and coming out with these concepts. So again, it wasn't for the latter day. Nichiren, in his lectures on the sutra, revealed that the purport or heart of the work is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The heart of the Lotus Sutra is the Daimoku. And from that standpoint, he proceeded to give his explication, his interpretation of the sutra as his observation of the mind, as his observation of his enlightened state, or the inner truth implicit in the text, and it constitutes a philosophy of profound depth. Let me read it again. Second paragraph on page 12, Roman numeral 12. Nichiren, in his lectures on the sutra, revealed that the purport or heart of the work is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And from that standpoint, he proceeded to give his explication of the sutra as a whole. This may be termed an interpretation based on his observation of the mind or the inner truth implicit in the text, and it constitutes a philosophy of profound depth because he was the first and the only one to perceive it. Nichiren, in effect, infused new life into the Lotus Sutra, because now with the perspective of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to be that unknown ingredient that they keep talking about in all the stuff that they write, wow, everything makes sense. All right? The record of the orally transmitted teachings begins with an explication of the term Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It then proceeds to cite key passages in each of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. In some cases, first introducing quotations from the commentaries of Tentai or Myolo on these passages, in other cases proceeding directly to Nichiren's interpretation, which, as mentioned earlier, is based on his observation of the mind, which he always says the orally transmitted teaching says. That's him talking about his observation of his mind. All right? That's how it'll be referenced as we go forward. Again, the record of the orally, middle of page 12, again, the record of the orally transmitted teaching begins with an explication, Roman numeral 12, of the term Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It then proceeds to key passages in each of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. Key passages, not the whole chapter. In some cases, first introducing quotations from the commentaries of Myolo and what they thought about those passages, on these passages. And in other cases, he proceeds directly into his own interpretation, which, as mentioned earlier, is based upon his observation of the mind, from his own Daimoku, from his own Buddhahood, from his own wisdom. The record concludes, it ends, with commentary on key passages from 2 short sutras, the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra and the Universal Worthy Sutra, that have traditionally been regarded as prologue and epilogue, respectively, of the Lotus Sutra. That's what makes the threefold Lotus Sutra. In all, orally transmitted teachings contains commentary on a total of 231 passages. That's all. 231 passages from this threefold Lotus Sutra. Furthermore, there are 2 additional sections. what is a basic philosophical outlook of what is the basic philosophical outlook of the orally transmitted teachings? Question mark. Various interpretations are possible, but my view, Daisaku Ikeda's view, is that ultimately it resides in the concept of the dignity of the human being and the dignity of a life. Everything is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Everything is the Buddha. In specific terms, it is the belief that ordinary people are capable of attaining Buddhahood, and that ordinary people are in fact Buddhas. In most religions, human beings are relegated to a level quite inferior to that of the sacred being or beings of the faith. But in a religion like Buddhism, whose basic mission is to elevate men and women to the highest plane of spiritual attainment, human beings are referred to rather as children of the gods or children of the Buddha, terminology that reflects the religion's very reason for existing. This fact is most clearly indicated in the following passages from the orally transmitted teachings. In the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni Buddha reveals that he attained Buddhahood in the far distant past. This is a quotation from the sutra. It has been immeasurable, boundless, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of nayutas of kalpas, he explains, since I in fact attained Buddhahood. From the Lotus Sutra, page 225. Ordinarily, one would, of course, take the I in this utterance to refer to Shakyamuni himself. But Nichiren declares that the I refers to the living beings of the Dharma realm, to each and every one in the 10 worlds. He is saying that all beings in the 10 worlds of existence have from the beginning been Buddhas. One might suppose that this is a statement of mere abstract principle. But Nichiren goes on to say, now Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are the original lords of teachings of the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra. That is, anyone who chants the Daimoku, regardless of who the person may be, can perceive. They unlock the ability to realize in their own life, can perceive that he or she has from the beginning been a Buddha. Can happen. In this way, he demonstrates the concrete application of his earlier statement. That's what we're all supposed to do, is to validate his teaching as being real and not being hypothetical. Thus, in a statement and straightforward pronouncement, he states, in a statement and straightforward pronouncement, he states the principle that ordinary people are identical with the Buddha. This view of human beings is one of the most outstanding characteristics of the orally transmitted teachings. But then there is the problem of human suffering. It would not be too much to say that all human life is in a sense a battle, a trial of endurance. Everybody's life is. That's what birth, old age, sickness, and death is qualifying. As Tolstoy has written, all happy families are alike, but an unhappy family is unhappy after its own fashion. In life, we are buffeted by a veritable storm of troubles. The death of kin, pronounces of incurable illness, bankruptcy, job loss, dissension in the family. This is the true nature of life. And for that reason, people turn to the teachings of the Lotus Sutra in hope of finding some safety in the midst of such realities, for the peace and security in their present existence that the Lotus Sutra promises. But if such ills condemn human beings to unhappiness, then we would have to conclude that the happy human being exists only in a fantasy. Nichiren himself lived a life marked by repeated troubles. So he's saying, you're always going to have obstacles. You're always going to have difficulties. There are always going to be the 3 obstacles and 4 devils, especially if you're on this path, that come to attack and try to obstruct you. Nichiren himself lived a life marked by repeated troubles and hardship. He said it was the 3 obstacles and 4 devils doing that to him. twice condemned to exile, faced with execution, attacked by warriors and ruffians, subjected to abuse and slander, again and again his very existence was in danger. His was a life far removed from the peace and security described in the Lotus Sutra. And for that very reason, many people doubted that Nichiren was in fact the kind of votary of the Lotus Sutra who faithfully carried out the sutra's injunctions. In his lectures on the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren, viewing the course of his own life, as each of us will, that's what we're going to Shakabuku people based on. It's not telling them stuff about other people, it's going to be telling them stuff about us, them seeing stuff about us. In his lectures on the Lotus Sutra, middle of page 13 now, Roman numeral, or page 14, Roman numeral, in his lectures on the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren, viewing the course of his own life and pondering the harsh realities of human existence, declared, "You should understand that when one practices the Lotus Sutra under such circumstances, difficulties will arise, and these are to be looked on as peaceful practices because it means you're advancing toward Buddhahood." Such a statement would at first seem to contradict the Lotus Sutra itself, but rather than being a conclusion that contradicts the Lotus Sutra, it is one that brings to light the true meaning of the sutra, a meaning that lies deeper than the mere surface words of the text. From his words, we learn that happiness means not the absence of troubles, but rather the refusal to be defeated by them, which is the true definition of happiness. Nichiren goes on to state, the Nirvana Sutra says the various sufferings that all living beings undergo, all these are the thus come one's own sufferings. And Nichiren declares that the various sufferings that all living beings undergo, all these are Nichiren's own sufferings. He announces that he will carry out an act of great compassion, sharing the sufferings of all beings and rescuing them from these sufferings. Thinking not of himself alone, he expresses a fervent desire to bring happiness to all human beings, showing through his own being the way for a Buddhist believer to proceed. And if you follow what he's shown us, you live the life of a bodhisattva of the earth. You live the same kind of life he does. And those peaceful practices become a process by which you actually attain a state of life where you care about other people. You care about the world. I pray for my country every day. I pray for other people. I don't just pray for my own benefit anymore. Okay? So it happens over a period of time. Continuing on the top of page 15, I would like to call attention to Nichiren's comments on the Bodhisattva Never Disparaging chapter of the Lotus Sutra. The example of patience and perseverance that this Bodhisattva presents, the power of a law that seeks to save both believers and maligners alike, his practice of paying honor to the Buddha nature present in all beings as he simply went about bowing to people. All this is a concrete demonstration of the belief that all people are capable of attaining Buddhahood. And Nichiren adopts this same practice as his own, developing it into a compassionate struggle to save all humankind through Kosen Rufu, or wide propagation of the teachings. Nichiren believed that the heart of Shakyamuni's lifetime teachings lay in the Lotus Sutra, and that the heart of the Lotus Sutra's practice lay in the Never Disparaging chapter. In one of his letters, he writes, "What does Bodhisattva Never Disparaging's profound respect for people signify? The purpose of the appearance in this world of Shakyamuni Buddha, the purpose of the appearance in this world of Shakyamuni Buddha, Lord of Teachings, lies in his behavior as a human being. It's what we do." This letter, which resounds with praise for the humanism of the Buddhist doctrine, stresses that the truth of Buddhism is not to be found in the words of the sutra alone, but in the Buddha's aim as they are revealed in the actions as they are revealed in his actions as a human being. It should become our actions as well. Pardon me. Bodhisattva Never Disparaging. Pardon me, I probably got white stuff all over me here. Give me a second. Bodhisattva, never disparaging, bowed to persons of all kinds in order to awaken them to the reality that they all possess the Buddha nature within themselves. In doing so, he gave expression to boundless courage and a faith that could not be shaken. Nichiren, in his comments on the never disparaging chapter, lists 14 different ways in which one could look at the act of obeisance observed by the Bodhisattva as he went about bowing to people. In one of these, he says, it is like the situation when one faces a mirror and makes a bow of obeisance. The image in the mirror likewise makes a bow of obeisance to oneself. Here he explains, here he is pointing to a highly important moral principle that appears to be lacking in modern society, namely a spirit of mutual trust and mutual esteem, one that understands that when you show respect for others, they will show respect for you. The principal cause of the the principal cause for the sense of alienation that besets human beings in our present day society is egotism. This is the conclusion reached in the observations I held some years ago with the historian Dr. Arnold Toynbee. And now how is one to overcome this attachment to egotism? From a Buddhist From a Buddhist point of view, it is to be accomplished by ridding human beings of their self-centeredness, of what Buddhism terms as the fundamental darkness that enshrouds their lives. This is ignorance, a lack of awareness of the true dignity of their existences, of the fact that, this is ignorance, the lack of awareness of the true dignity of their existences, of the lack, This is ignorance, a lack of awareness of the true dignity of their existences, of the fact that their own lives are embodiments of the wonderful law, and that they themselves have been, from the beginning, been Buddhas. And what can wipe out this ignorance is a firm faith, a faith that never doubts the Buddha nature within all men and women, never doubts the dignity of their inner beings. The engendering of such faith is how humankind's greatest, the engendering of such faith is now humankind's greatest need, is it not? An organization of people who are spreading Nichiren's philosophy of peace and life, and who share its doctrines and ideals, exist at present in 190 different countries and regions of the world. The solidarity of men and women who are awakened to the true dignity of life will continue to expand and make it possible that war and terrorism can be wiped out, and that poverty, destruction of the environment, and other global problems that now threaten humankind can be solved. I firmly believe that the day will come, and my own great desire is that it may come as quickly as possible. In closing, I would like to express my own heartfelt wish that readers will find in this book a fountain of inexhaustible wisdom, and that it will enable them to live lives filled with boundless courage and hope. Daisaku Ikeda. And we'll try to make this as close to 30 minutes as possible, but sometimes it might be a little over. Thank you very much.